You know those moments when you are sitting and you're fantasizing about what you would do in this moment if you won the lottery? What would you do tomorrow if that lottery money was sitting in your bank account? I know you think about this a lot because I do. Sometimes it's fun, sometimes it's fun, but that's not a healthy way of thinking. And a lot of times it's unrealistic. A lot of times those thoughts can even put limits on us because you get wrapped up in thinking that money is everything, and it's actually not. I'll be doing a separate video on that topic of money, but that's definitely for another time. But you just sit there and you fantasize on what you would do if this situation happened for you. What type of person would you be? You're coming up with those things in your head. You're literally making up who you would be. And not one time in those moments are we aligning it with who God wants us to be. We're thinking about who we want to be. We're thinking about what we want, not what God wants, not what his will is for our life, not what God's purpose is. It's we. That's a very limited way of thinking. And thinking like that hinders us in different ways. And we're going to talk about those ways in today's episode, but I don't want to be rude. So let me introduce myself.
Show her every door and how the windows let the sun in. Copy out the key and tell her this is for becoming. Even in the fever, baby, cry and get to running.
Hi, babes. Welcome back to the LVME Unbroken podcast. This is where we swallow the big pills, not the little ones. And I'm here to deliver some harsh truths to you. The truths that your friends don't tell you, the truths that your family members haven't been telling you. They're not telling you what you need to hear, but what you want to hear. And so I'm here to do the opposite. And it looks like you could use some help from a stranger. So I'm your gift. Happy holidays. But I want to talk about those unrealistic expectations we tend to have. And another word for that would be fantasies. Those unrealistic expectations we tend to have are typically rooted in our desires. And because they're rooted in our desires for ourselves, they're not usually rooted in God's will over our lives. And that's where we make our first mistake. Oftentimes, these unrealistic expectations we have for ourselves, they tend to hinder our spiritual growth, and they tend to hinder God's purpose over our lives. So it's almost like we're unintentionally putting ourselves in a box. And we can see this for ourselves. You can think about, let's go back to winning the lottery. Thinking about that example, when you think of winning that much money and you start fantasizing on what you're going to do with it, it's almost like you're putting a cap on yourself. It's you putting a cap over your life. This is where I see myself. But typically God sees way more than what we see in ourselves. He sees way more, and he shows us every single time. It's not just about the money. You're so much more valuable than money. You're so much more capable than what you think you are. And that's why it's important for us to release those fantasies, release those unrealistic expectations, because they can never amount to who we actually will become. They can never amount to what God actually has for us. They can never amount to God's will over our lives. It's so important to let those things go and those thoughts go. And I want to make this very clear that this is not me telling you to give up hope. I don't want anybody hopeless out here. Because someone could easily take this and misconstrue it and just say, no. I'm not telling you to give up hope. I am simply asking or telling you to surrender to what God has for you instead of what you think you have for yourself, instead of what your flesh allows you to think about yourself. That's literally all I'm saying. Now, I know this conversation is not going to be for everybody. This topic is not for everybody. And in fact, a lot of the things that I may say, they may go over some of your heads. And if it does, it's probably not for you. But the ones that's supposed to get it, oh yeah, you're going to get it. You're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's going to align with your thoughts perfectly. Now, clinging to those unrealistic expectations, it can be dangerous. It can be very dangerous. And it's because when we do that, we tend to prioritize fantasies over God's will, over God's voice. You'll start unintentionally now. You won't even realize it's happening, but you will start to listen to the fantasies in your head versus what God is telling you, versus what God is showing you, versus what God is saying to you. You think it's supposed to be this way because you've thought about it this way for so long. but all along it's supposed to be this way, and God has been showing you it's supposed to be this way, but you can't even see it because your fantasies have blinded you. Those unrealistic expectations have blinded you. Those things that we fantasize about can typically become things that we idolize, and idolizing things or people or just, lifestyle or whatever it is that you're idolizing, it can be very misleading and it can easily send you down a rabbit hole. And to clarify that a bit more, I can say that fantasizing about a perfect relationship or a perfect career or a perfect lifestyle, it will typically not align with God's will. And that is why it's dangerous. That's why you need to take heed and make sure your thoughts aren't getting misconstrued. Now, some of us don't realize it, but some of us fantasize on a daily over some of the smaller things in life. Like me using the lottery example, that was an extreme. That was an extreme. But some of you, I ain't gonna say no names, but some of you are in some very toxic relationships. And you are constantly fantasizing on how amazing life is going to be when that relationship is non-toxic anymore, when that person is finally doing what they're supposed to do as a man or a woman, when y'all are finally in a healthy place, when clearly y'all aren't going to get to that place, when clearly you have been given every sign possible to show you that this person is just not for you, but you're steadily fantasizing about what you want from this person. You're steadily fantasizing about potential. You're fantasizing about potential, and it causes you to force something that clearly is not working. So when I say fantasizing or having unrealistic expectations, it doesn't have to be to an extreme. It can be something that simple. The same thing goes for a job or a career that you may, a career path you may be on, or a job you may have. The same thing can go for a project that you're working on. I don't care how you put it. Some of you have those unrealistic expectations about things that's going on in your life, and it's causing you to not make certain moves that you need to make to elevate. Another example of fantasizing would be you're constantly trying to reopen a door that God has closed for a reason. God has purposely closed this door in your face. He slammed it, child, and you still don't get the hint. You still don't get it. And you're steadily trying to reopen it. Let's go back to you allowing certain people in your life still. Say that person has cut you off abruptly. You can look at that as God closing the door, because you weren't going to close it. So he had to close it for you. And after that has happened, you are constantly reaching out to this person, apologizing for things that's not worth apologizing for. You've probably done nothing wrong. You've probably done absolutely nothing wrong, but you're steadily reaching out to this person because you just want them in your life, knowing they're not good for you, knowing you don't need them in your life. That is a fantasy, and you need to let go of it. Another form of fantasizing would be you neglecting prayer because you're scared. You are neglecting prayer because you don't know what it is that God is going to tell you. And you feel like he's probably going to tell you something that you don't want to hear. So instead, you seek your own guidance instead of praying and understanding what it is that God wants you to do. See, all of these things, they're kind of like wrapped up into fear. You hold on to these unrealistic expectations because you're scared. You think you're incapable. It's very sad, honestly. I know a lot of people that do this too. Now, what are some ways, how can you crucify those unrealistic expectations? How can you get rid of them? How can you stop giving your energy to them? Well, the first step to fix anything is acknowledging that thing. Acknowledge whatever that fantasy is. Acknowledge whatever that unrealistic expectation is first. Because if you can't even admit it, then you can hang up solving the issue. You can hang up solving the problem. You have to be honest with yourself, and you got to go deep. You got to dig deep within and be okay with acknowledging what that thing is. So it's basically you just being honest about what you're holding on to and why. And the next step after acknowledging it would be surrendering it. You have to learn how to let this stuff go, man. You have to learn how to let go of things and surrender them to God and God alone. And a part of that would just be you praying for the strength to let it, not only praying for the strength to let it go, but you also want to pray for clarity to see what it is that he has for you instead, outside of that fantasy, outside of that unrealistic expectation. You need to sit with God for a second, for a minute, maybe an hour or a day. I don't care. You need to sit with God nonetheless and figure out what is it that he has for you. And simply next, you would just align it with God's will. Once you figure out what that thing is, once you get some clarity about what God has for you, you will then be able to easily align it with God's will over your life. Focus on his promises that always affirm that his plan is greater than yours. Because we all know that God always has a plan for us, and it's never to harm us. It's always to help us. And be obedient. Be obedient. Once you finally get to that stage and you're surrendering, or you're acknowledging you've surrendered, now you found out what it is that he has for you, be obedient, because he's going to tell you next what to do with that thing. He's going to tell you next how to get to that certain thing, or what to do with that thing that he provides for you. He's going to tell you. You just have to be obedient about it. If he's calling you to do something, do it, even if it's uncomfortable. Mostly when it's uncomfortable. If I'm being completely transparent with you, when I looked back at the vision board that I created for myself at the beginning of the year, and this in itself shows me how much I've grown this year. But when I look back at that vision board, I see a lot of those things were fantasies. They were fantasies, not all of them, but a good amount of them. They were fantasies. And yeah, I mean, vision boards are great if you create them the right way. So for my vision board for next year, I do plan on creating it differently because I'm a different person now. I've learned so much this year. But I created that vision board without confronting God about every single thing on there. I didn't pray about a single thing on there. I fantasized about who I thought I wanted to be. I fantasized about things that I thought that I wanted, and didn't even know what the greater purpose would be in each of those things. Some of them were money driven too, and I hate that for me. Some of them were money driven, which is the bottom of the barrel, if I'm being completely honest. So I had a lot of fantasies, and I've let them go throughout the year. There's a couple of them that I've clinged to. I've prayed to God about them. I've gotten clarity for them. But a lot of them, absolutely not. And I know that that's simply because they don't align with God's will over my life. They don't align with what God has for me and the person that God is calling me to be. They don't align with God's purpose for us. And because I know that now, I've been more than okay with letting those fantasies go. And again, this conversation might go over some of your heads because you don't realize that there's power in your thoughts. There's so much power in your thoughts and your tongue, the things that you speak over your life, the things that you think about yourself, the things that you think about in general. There's so much power in those things. Physical strength has nothing on mental strength. Absolutely nothing. I don't care how strong you are physically. That mental strength and lack thereof will take you up through there. So you have to be very careful how you think about certain things. Be very careful about how you think about yourself and how you speak about yourself, how you carry yourself and the things that you allow in your life, because some of those things can be very, very detrimental. This wasn't a light word that I've had. And this word may have caused one of you to shake up a little bit, but I don't mean any harm. I come in peace. I'm only here to help. And I hope that this has helped someone and has provided some type of clarity for you. And I hope that you can do something with it. But in the meantime, and between time, it was amazing speaking with you all. Thank you so much for tuning in. And we'll talk very, very, very soon. Take care.